I've always thought the story of Thomas has given doubt a bad name. By that I mean the story is often interpreted to mean that people of faith should not experience doubt and instead believe. The very words of Jesus to Thomas this morning appear to confirm that. Do not doubt, but believe, and blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe, as if doubt were the opposite of faith. Thus, if you doubt, or if you are uncertain in life, you are not really being faithful. And so, doubting Thomas has served as a cautionary tale of a disciple who did not really believe. The problem with this interpretation, for me, is that it ignores, that it gets doubt and our experience, our very human experience of uncertainty, completely wrong. Now, I cannot tell you how often through the years I have conversations with people who may be interested in connecting to the church or joining the church, who express to me, while they've enjoyed coming and singing and being part of the community, they are unsure about really making that connection because they have doubts. And they perceive people in the pews, you people, as being certain of your beliefs. And whether those beliefs revolve around such things as the virgin birth or the divinity of Jesus, or even, as for Thomas, the very possibility of resurrection, they think because they doubt, they do not belong. It would be disingenuous to claim to be part of a believing community. That to pretend to believe with certainty and without doubt is problematic, lacks integrity. So they are often surprised when I tell them the church is filled with people who doubt, who experience uncertainty. They're even more shocked when I confess my own doubts and uncertainty about seeing God in the world and what it means to really follow Jesus, to believe in the resurrected. My guess is that if I asked everyone here this morning to raise your hand if you have doubts and uncertainty, just about everyone would raise their hand, even preachers, right? More so. And those who didn't probably would be just a little embarrassed to admit the truth out loud. The reality is to be human, to have the human experience, is to live in uncertainty. And let's be clear, we don't like uncertainty. I think I must confess, part of our collective anxiety and fear these days is an experience of uncertainty and doubt as the world unfolds. Don't you think? The institutions we expected to give us a sense of security in the world have turned upside down. Rules for civil discourse, civic life have been disrupted. We find ourselves without the anchors in our society that might limit our uncertainty. And ironically, the very forces that have led us to much of our own uncertainty and doubt, those very forces these days are rigidly certain they are right. They have no doubt. And there is something appealing about the certainty of faith. I would posit that those in the church who hold on to, and there are many, unbending interpretations of faith they claim are always true, unbending interpretations of faith that are literal interpretations, they would say. They believe that because they need certainty. Certainty in the beliefs of their faith, even in an uncertain world. They believe that without doubt, because it gives them comfort in a time when everything just seems to be falling apart, right? From climate change to AI to wars around the world. Certainty in some fundamental thing gives us a sense of safety and comfort in the world. But that's not who we're called to be. Truth be told, Thomas is not the only one in this story who doubts. The very first line of the story we read informs us that Easter night, the disciples are locked away in a house for fear of the Jews, afraid, uncertain, doubting the words of the women who told him about the resurrection, about what has happened, what will happen. It is there in that uncertainty, in that doubt of that moment that Jesus appears and says to them, "Peace be with you." And I've always, the question I never can get answered, where was Thomas? Why wasn't he there in the house with the rest of the disciples? Maybe he wasn't as afraid as the disciples, was out in the street ministering to others. Did he have more courage than those disciples who hid themselves with the doors shut? And notice, even a week later after Jesus appears to the disciples, the sentence is, the story is, they are still locked away in the same house. They've seen the risen Lord, but they're so uncertain and doubting, they're still hiding. Doubting maybe even their own experience. But this time Thomas is there, and Jesus says again to them, "Peace be with you." And he invites Thomas to touch the wounds on his hands, on his side. "Do not doubt," he says, "but believe." Now, I don't know about you, but it's always bothered me in this story, the fact that the risen Lord, the resurrected body of Jesus, still bears the wounds of his crucifixion. You'd think resurrection would heal wounds, right? Resurrection life would no longer bear the marks of a cruel and broken world. But the truth is that in feeling the wounds of Jesus, that Thomas finally comes to believe. And even more than that, to do something none of the other disciples have done. He experiences the wounded, scarred Jesus, and he says, "My Lord and my God." One of the first to ever confess that. And it is in the pain, it is in the woundedness, it is in the scars of Jesus, and even of his own uncertainty and doubt, that Thomas finally comes to believe. After all, what are scars but proof of our having been alive and having loved and having persevered through it? We shouldn't be ashamed of our wounds. Do not doubt, Jesus says, but believe. Now, it's important to understand that the word here for believe is not some intellectual assent to a confessional statement about Jesus. It's not some feeling of feeling confident, certain. The word believe simply means trust. In other words, can you, as you experience doubt and uncertainty, trust God is there in the midst of your own woundedness? Can you feel and encounter the wounds of the world and have faith and trust that God walks with us, still bearing the wounds of his crucifixion, yet giving us peace in our uncertainty and doubt? The risen Lord is not asking us not to doubt or remove our doubts, but calls us to trust in the midst of it. when all seems lost and we want to hide in the house with the doors closed. So, brothers and sisters, we are not called to a life without uncertainty and doubt. We are called to trust God most especially when we are uncertain about how God's love and grace will be manifest in this difficult world and in our unclear lives. Doubt is not the enemy of faith. It is the very source of our trust, especially when we cannot see what the future will hold. But that is when the wounded Christ, the wounded risen Lord, appears among us and tells us, "Peace be with you." How many of you have seen the movie Conclave? Anybody here seen the movie Conclave? Came out in 2024. Central character in this movie, which is a story about a pope who dies, and they're convening a conclave to elect a new pope. And it's one of the central characters is Cardinal Thomas, who's dean of the College of Cardinals, and it's about him convening this conclave in which they're going to choose the new leader of their church, and it shows all the political machinations. Surprise, surprise, there's politics in church. Sometimes the petty backstabbing occurring as they have to vote to choose who's going to be their spiritual leader in the world. And to open the conclave, they have this meaningful, beautiful mass service. Cardinal Thomas steps up to preach a sermon. He starts in Latin, a beautiful language to listen to, but then he kind of stops and he kind of considers the power of this moment, and he says these words. "My brothers and sisters, in the course of a long life in the service of our Mother, the Church, let me tell you that the one sin I have come to fear more than any other is certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. Even Christ was not certain at the end. Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, he cried out in his agony, the 9th hour of the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Cardinal Thomas goes on, "Our faith is a living thing, precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty, and if there was no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith." And he concludes by saying, "And may God give us a pope who doubts." To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.